The superannuation tax, the controversial super tax. Now, we've talked a lot about this and it's back in the news again today. This is around funds with more than $3 million in them, still causing great alarm right around the country. The biggest problem is not the doubling of the tax on returns from the fund on anything over $3 million from 15 to 30%. I mean, people are not happy about that. But the idea that you can be forced to pay tax on something you've not sold. Now, prominent business leaders, including Lindsay Fox and lesser-known transport company owners Kim Lindsay and Neil Mansell, have taken a swing at Jim Chalmers today, saying the hit on unrealised capital gains within superannuation accounts will drive Australians to restructure their retirement savings or liquidate their assets early. Of course, that's what's going to happen. Today, the opposition's Tim Wilson hit out at the upcoming Chalmers roundtable. He called it a tax summit and union-dominated.
So far, all we've had is proposals for tax hikes. It's a tax hike summit from Treasurer Jim Chalmers. Initially it was a productivity one. It's now ended up being a tax hike summit. The unions have very clearly outlined their agenda.
Here to take us through it, economist David Pearl. David, good to catch up with you again. The government is standing its ground on this unrealised benefits tax, but they seem to be sort of, almost thinking they might have to drop that part of it. Will they?
Thanks for having me on, Steve. I think they might. It's significant that the government hasn't scheduled introduction to Parliament yet, and as I've said on your program before, I don't think Anthony Albanese's sold on this, so we could yet see a withdrawal of this tax proposal, which I do think would be a devastating blow to Jim Chalmers' credibility.
Well, we saw on page one of The Australian today, I mean, Lindsay Fox is a big name around Australia. The other two transport operators are big but not as well known. But they're right, aren't they, that people will simply go to their financial advisors, and anyone with $3 million in a self-managed super fund, as you know, David, would have a financial advisor they trust and restructure what they're doing.
They will, and this is the problem with capital taxation, that if you apply a capital tax to a very thin base, which is what the government's doing with this paper profits tax, there's enormous scope for people to restructure their affairs. After all, if you invest in your own home that you occupy, you don't pay any capital gains.
So, what happens if the critics are right and widespread asset sell-offs or fund restructuring happens? I mean, the amount of money that is going to be taken in, and the excuse for this is the budget's in bad shape and we need to, increase the tax revenue. Well, it's going to be minuscule, the amount of money, isn't it?
Well, even if there will be restructuring, Steve, you're right, but even if Treasury's totally unrealistic assumption is complied with, it's only set to raise $40 billion over 10 years. I know that sounds like a lot of money, but this financial year, the Commonwealth will spend $750 billion. So it's a drop in the ocean. As I said before, I think the game plan behind this tax is to establish a beachhead or a precedent so that once it's legislated, Jim Chalmers can say, well, let's look at people with share investments over $1 million or investments in residential property over $1 million or $2 million. They're well off, aren't they? They could pay paper profits tax as well. I think it's really a beachhead. It's not about fixing the deficit. The main mechanism to fix the deficit, as you know, is bracket creep that we all pay every year.
So, I mean, you worked as an assistant secretary in Treasury. I mean, there's obviously someone or a group within Treasury who I suspect have decided to do exactly what you just said, to use it as a way into this form of taxation, and they've probably done numbers which we may never see on how it would spread out and how much it would add to the bottom line of Jim Chalmers' budget. Is that what you suspect?
Well, the old school Treasury that I joined 25 years ago was not addicted to tax. Unfortunately, Treasury has now become an offshoot of the Australian Taxation Office, and it's also full of people who are itching to raise taxes on investors. In fact, Jenny Wilkinson, the Treasury Secretary, will no doubt be making that case when she speaks at the Reform Summit next week. So yes, there would be people in Treasury who believe that we should be taxing investors far more than we are. Treasury puts out a tax expenditure statement every year which has no credibility whatsoever, but purports to make that point. And that's always seized upon by the class warriors and the Labor Party and the Grattan Institute.
Do you agree then with Tim Wilson that this is going to turn into a tax summit, this round table?
Well, as soon as the round table was announced, let's go back to Anthony Albanese. He said this was a productivity round table. Jim Chalmers, days later, reframed it as one on budget sustainability. And Steve, and you and your listeners know, budget sustainability is Canberra speak for higher taxes on working people. I don't think Ted O'Brien, the opposition Treasury spokesperson, should be at this summit. It's a trap for him. He either goes along with a consensus to raise taxes on middle-class people, or he stands aside from it, and Jim Chalmers and Anthony Albanese can accuse the opposition of being obstructive. In fact, I have another proposal, and that is that this event be televised so that average Australian taxpayers can see when the invited speakers are offering up their hard-earned cash for budget savings. I think that would be a wonderful transparency exercise, and it would really flush out the agenda in this summit.
My bosses at Sky News love you, David. They would love to be able to get a camera in there, don't you worry. And I tell you what, it'd rate its socks off.
Absolutely, I think so. I'm no expert on TV, but I suspect it would.
Well, you're an expert on economics. David Pearl, always good to catch up with you. Thank you very much.